Hi, everyone. You're watching episode 4 of Zapper TV. Hey, everyone. So welcome back. It is Friday, June 18th, 2021. We are going to be talking today with the grandfather of Ethereum, Dmitry Buterin, who goes by Dima. So Dmitry is also the co-founder of Blockgeeks. Blockgeeks is a blockchain education portal with a community of over 240,000 folks. And just as a reminder, if you've never watched Zapper TV, this is where we host the brightest minds in DeFi, and our goal is to educate the next generation of DeFi and Ethereum users. So we're honored to have you, Dima. Happy early Father's Day. Welcome to Zapper TV. How are you doing?
Thank you. Yeah. Hey, guys. It's really good to be here. Excited to have this conversation.
So great. I was thinking ahead about our schedule, and I was like, man, like I can't recall all the different people, but multiple people have said to me before, they're like, oh, you have to interview Dima. Like, he's got a really interesting perspective, having literally fathered the founder of Ethereum. So we're gonna talk all today about some about the history of Ethereum and like the lasting impact and like where we are today. But I really think the reason this is an important conversation is that you can't really know where you're going if you don't understand your past. And Ethereum is approaching its 6th birthday anniversary in July. A lot has happened. I've been in the community for about 4 years, and I just figured that out today, actually, Dima, before we came on. I was like, oh, wow, it's been 4 years. Because I remember I got in thinking like, I'm so late. Like, I hope I can still contribute.
Right. And even now, right? People feel, oh, it's too late, right? Should I buy all of this, whatever, Shiba coins, whatever, because Ethereum is so expensive, right? But it's so ridiculous, right? We're still so early to this.
So early, so early. Yeah. There's the concept of even what is Ethereum, which is, I want to ask you how you explain that, but even that today it's become much easier because there's, at least in my focus, there's so many applications in DeFi that I use. So I show friends and it brings it all to life. But even years ago, that was much more challenging to do. But I want to back up to like your background first, just as a human being. I know that you immigrated from Russia to Canada, and I'm wondering if you can just tell me a little bit about like growing up, and maybe like how did that experience, influence, who you are as a person today, and maybe then we can launch into a little bit about, raising Vitalik, what that was like.
Sure. Yeah, I grew up in what used to be Soviet Union, in its southern part called Chechnya. And so I lived in that part of Russia until I was 17. Then I went to a university in Moscow, studied computer science. Then I started my first business at the age of, still in Moscow, at the age of, I guess, 25. And then I lived in Moscow for a few more years. And then at the age of 27, I moved to Canada. And been living here in Toronto ever since. Yeah, so, and most of my life I've been a tech entrepreneur.
What was Vitalik then born in Russia or in Canada?
Yes, in Russia, yes.
Gotcha. Yeah. So how old was Vitalik when you all moved?
He just turned 6 before he came here, yeah.
So I guess like growing up in the Soviet Union, moving to Canada, I'm curious, like when you eventually discover cryptocurrency, which I've never understood whether you introduced it to Vitalik or if he introduced it to you. I'm wondering like what light bulbs went off in your head, just because every person has their own unique life experience. There's different light bulbs that will go off according to what you've experienced. And I'm wondering what resonated with Bitcoin when you all first discovered that.
Sure. I mean, one very strong energy in me is curiosity, and I'm always curious about stuff, and especially about all things technology related, right? So I came across Bitcoin probably in 2011. I think it was from a podcast with Steve Gibson. He's got this security-related podcast that's actually been running now for whatever 15 years. And I learned about this, and it just sounded to me like a really cool invention. And it also connected with the concept of growing up in the Soviet Union. All things were run by the state, right? So people were used to that extreme concept of nanny state trying to do everything. State was providing your education and, then telling you where you're going to have a job and, telling you where you're going to live and all of that stuff, right? And that was a dismal failure. It was such a mess, and we grew up heavily indoctrinated with this is how the things should be. But growing up, eventually you realize, oh, this is just not working, right? So for me, when I came across Bitcoin, it was like, oh, wow, this is a concept of something that very powerful technology that's not dependent on any kind of central system. And that was very, very interesting to me. And at that time, I cannot say that I paid too much attention to that. I was way too busy, raising my child and my other kids and building businesses. But I kept a peripheral watch of that space since then.
Maybe you can talk to me then a little bit about just like some of the highlights around Vitalik entering into Bitcoin and eventually starting Bitcoin Magazine and then bringing you. My understanding is you are the first person he brought the Ethereum white paper to. So I'm like,
not necessarily the first, but probably one of the first. He's got a lot of his online contacts and friends. But yeah, I do recall. Actually, I'm sitting in this room where he kind of showed me his laptop. I think it was the white paper, which was 7.5 years ago, I guess.
Crazy.
In November 2013.
Yeah. What did you think when you first looked over the white paper? Because I know it had to have been a little over your head, right? I mean, Vitalik already had
It was, yeah. But also, as you guys know, Vitalik is really good at explaining very complex concepts in a very simple language, right? And this is how you know that the person knows. If somebody can explain to you something, even though it's very technical and complicated, then you know that, yeah, this person understands what they're talking about. And that's how I felt after reading their white paper. Like, oh, wow. Like, even though like their cryptography aspects and a bunch of other stuff, I don't really know that much about them, but conceptually it made so much sense. So yeah, that was my impression of that, and was really excited to see that unfold.
I'm curious then, how do you explain in simpler language, how do you explain what is Ethereum and what problem it solves when you talk with, friends, family, strangers?
I mean, friends and family, most people are not really that deep into the space. So the explanation that I give really is always tailored to the context of the person, right? Like how deep a metaphor they need, what's their level of technical knowledge and whatnot. So like, I don't have a universal answer, right?
Right.
I would say by now, most people understand Bitcoin, or, don't understand. Very few people understand Bitcoin, right? But many people are aware of Bitcoin, right? And they're aware, okay, this is some kind of electronic money. And I usually start with that. I say, hey guys, you've heard about Bitcoin? Yes, we have. So Bitcoin is a monetary system which runs without any reliance on centralized institutions. And I kind of talk to that a little bit, and then people are like, okay, yeah, that makes sense, kind of understand. And it's so funny, right? Because even at this day and age, most people quite often venture into this rabbit hole of like, oh, but Bitcoin is not backed by anything, while dollars are backed by gold. I'm like, hey guys, no, since 1970 or whatever it was, it's no money in the no major currency in the world is backed by anything, right? So it's all really in our minds. So then once we talk about Bitcoin for a little bit, I'm like, okay, so Bitcoin really is a system to keep track of monetary assets, right? And then a lot of people around me are technical, right? So kind of one metaphor, a couple of metaphors that I use sometimes. With less technical people, it's a metaphor about a calculator. So Bitcoin is like a calculator, is really awesome for some specific functions it's designed for. And then Ethereum is an evolution of that as a smartphone where you can run apps on top of that. Another metaphor that I use is HTML versus JavaScript, right? So internet, and then you can build pretty cool websites on top of the internet with HTML. But again, they're static, and then Ethereum gives you the power of running applications on top of that, and so it gives you the programming language to run any kind of application. And then sometimes I talk to specific, examples of applications. So yeah, I mean, there's some of the examples, but again, it's always very context specific.
Yeah, I like that. And I think that's actually a good reminder to everyone that you really need to ask questions first and know what that person is familiar with so you can start to connect those dots. Launching into an elevator pitch, not knowing anything about what someone knows about money and banking, and with Ethereum, you really have to understand the importance of having this worldwide settlement layer and being able to take advantage of that.
Yeah, exactly. Once we kind of go a little bit beyond the superficial stuff, then again, I try to quite often conceptualize that as so this is like a virtual computer, which is uncensorable and unstoppable and neutral. So if you will, it's like a virtual computer based in Switzerland where you can run any applications that nobody can censor, nobody can influence, and then it can execute, and the system executes them. And those and that code has access and control to assets. So that's really the core concept for me.
I'm curious, did you ever foresee the growth of DeFi, or that maybe before DeFi was coined as DeFi, did you ever foresee that as product market fit for Ethereum? Let's go back to 2016, 2015,
right.
2017. Or did this take you by surprise?
I cannot say that I had some, huge foresight about this, but it was pretty clear quite a bit of time ago that those kind of applications, they make a lot of sense, right? Just because by its nature, Ethereum as a system which can control, the programming code that control financial assets and resources. So we have our traditional financial system, right? And now we have this new layer of programmable finance. So what we now call DeFi, right? That made a lot of sense. That would be one of their types of applications running on that.
Any DeFi applications that you are using regularly, without disclosing, of course, where your assets are, but more just what DeFi maybe have you found more interesting?
I mean, I try to, when I come across different things, I try to play with them just to get a feel, try different wallets. For example, obviously MetaMask is a layer in that. Then Argent is a very interesting experiment and a very different approach to social recovery and direct access to DeFi stuff. My Ether wallet, all kinds of wallets. I look at them, I play with them. And then in terms of decentralized apps, again, I played with MakerDAO wallets, and I used Aave and done staking, and I've used things like Alpha Hammer, and used Sushi, and I've used Uniswap. And I mean, I kind of try to play with different systems just to get a feel for them, right? I'm not heavy regular user, but I try to maintain a familiarity with the different systems.
Absolutely. Well, and I think that's part of the reason you're able to communicate the value of it and teach others about it, because it's you have to try. You basically have to be curious enough to try this stuff, and you learn a lot. I'm trying to think. Susu, if I'm saying his name correctly, he has this quote pinned on his Twitter about if you want to be a great mountain climber, you can't just listen to stories about it and watch others. You have to actually take the step yourself. And I really resonate with that. It's all about, you got to get your hands dirty and actually.
And that's what I usually tell people. It's when people, especially people new to the space, I tell them, hey guys, you know what, just start somewhere and, maybe put some money into Ethereum and Bitcoin, and nowadays would highly recommend them to play with some DeFi stuff. But their most important aspect is start somewhere, because once you have some motivations, some motivation behind this, when you have real interest, you have some of your money in that, then you will be much more motivated to learn more.
Yeah, so I'd love to get your perspective then on the last 5, 6, 7 years. Are you able to highlight like what you think are some of the the best of times and maybe even like the hardest of times? Because for those that are new, like let's pretend someone just in the last month discovered a DeFi application and is learning about Ethereum. There's actually so much in our history to consume, and it's going to take time and effort for anyone to really learn that history. But if you had to highlight again some of the inflection points maybe in Ethereum over the years, what do you recount in that history?
I mean, my mind naturally doesn't go too much into the past. I'm more curious about what is now, and sometimes thinking about the future, more grounded in the current moment. So I rarely really talk about that. If you ask me about this stuff, obviously the whole 2017 ICO craze was really fascinating, right? And once Ethereum proved its initial viability and had some success, right? And money is a very important thing for people. Obviously, it's directly connected to resources and the fear of death in us humans, right? So money is important. So can I see all of those ICOs coming up, and then looking at them, and many people were asking me to for their projects to join their projects as an advisor, right? And obviously they really didn't care about me, but I was like, oh, let's have Vitalik's last name on the project. Okay, whatever. And I would always ask them to, okay, give me your white paper, explain what are you doing. And very, very few people, pretty much nobody, was able to explain in any meaningful terms. Like they would send me a white paper, would read it and say, hey guys, okay, so obviously it's some complicated bullshit. So you basically just want to raise some money. And after some hemming and hawing, people would say, yeah, kind of that's really what we're trying to do. And for me, that really didn't make sense. So I looked at most of their projects launched back then, right? I'm like, oh my God, this doesn't make any sense to me. Like, why are people raising so much money, right? In terms of, you don't need that much money to build a decent tech project. And actually, that much money will definitely corrupt your project and mess you up in some ways. So the whole ICO boom was really fascinating. And I remember talking to some really smart people in this space, and we were just talking about, oh, wouldn't it be cool to short all of those projects, because there is no way that this is a sustainable thing, right? But then, as you know, markets can be irrational far much longer, and then you can stay solvent. That's a famous saying. So, I mean, the DAO hack obviously was a big deal, and the whole dialogue about that, and the Ethereum Classic, and I mean, I really could not see any future for that, just because very early on it was clear to me that for any kind of blockchain crypto related project, the core, the biggest value of it is not really in the technology and the ideas, because yeah, you can just fork it, you can create a copy, most of it is open source, but the community, right? So when I looked at this, I'm like, okay, so here's the Ethereum community, and even already by the time of DAO, there were a lot of really awesome people there. So I'm like, okay, I feel good about this group of people, and I can see that most of them are aligned with where Ethereum is going. So when I look at Ethereum Classic and then I look at their community and people involved, I didn't have that much confidence. Like, you know what, this looks like a very ragtag team with there's no underlying vision. So okay, and obviously it was a really hard call, because I can understand their sentiment about their immutability of the blockchain, right? But then also there are no absolutes in this world, right? However much we want them to be, and this is also what people talk about nowadays as Bitcoin maximalism, right? I love Bitcoin. I think it was an awesome invention, but trying to cling to their perfection of anything, I think it's it's a dead end. There is no perfect anything. There is nothing that can be stable and perfect forever. Things have to evolve, and for me, what I'm seeing, the evolutionary nature of Ethereum and its community and the system, it makes so much more sense. And I actually have to say that initially, as a person who was more used to building companies, right, the approach that the Ethereum community and Vitalik has taken to building seemed very risky to me because it was so loose, right? Like, hey, how are you approaching recruiting even key members into the Ethereum Foundation, this and that, right? Like, if I was doing that, then I would have done differently. Well, but I'm not doing that. They're doing that. And over time, I've seen a lot of value in a very different approach that was undertaken in terms of creating this loosely, well, actually quite tightly connected through common values, through the Ethers community, people doing different things, right? And people, some guys building this, and another guy looks at this, and they create, then they try to build on top of this, they connect. So really, this reminds me of how life works. This is one of their reflections, manifestations of the natural flow of life. Life is not static, and the more diversity, the more different sources, if you will, of randomness and creativity you put into this boiling pot, then there are many more experiments can be run. And some of them, they will die and, whatever, Titan and this and that. But there are many more. There will be so much learning from that, right? And we will learn from that and we'll move forward.
That's so well verbalized. Because I've tried to explain to others. I still hold Bitcoin myself. I also think of it as it's this incredible invention, and I don't think Bitcoin has any chance of failing anytime soon without something absolutely catastrophic happening that I don't foresee.
Yes.
But that was why I gravitated towards Ethereum, and this is kind of why Ethereum, I think, has attracted a lot of personality types, which maybe I'm biased, but as a father, I've met so many other fathers actually in this space, and mothers. And I've thought at times that it's my kids, they remind you that, like you said, life is not, it's not predictable. It's not constant. It's always fluctuating, and there's lots of change. And so it was very difficult for me to grapple with Bitcoin just never changing. And I understand the argument about why that's so valuable, of course. And I buy into those arguments actually in most cases, but separate from that, that is why, that's why my heart has been in Ethereum. I mean, it's a matter of philosophy, but it's also a matter of, there's no doubt the capital that we have in Ethereum and Bitcoin, it aligns people, it brings people. I mean, capital gets people to work well together. And long story short, I really love the way you think about just again this concept of things are unpredictable and they will change. And I think that beautifully describes the chaos that we've lived through that has really resulted in all of the applications, everything that's flourishing on Ethereum today. Years ago, I couldn't foresee that. I was wondering, how will we get to all these teams actually building stuff that people can use that solve real problems? And one way or another, I mean, I don't know who to credit with all of that. But as a community, I think we're on the cusp of solving so many more enormous problems for regular people. I mean, I want us to get to the point where you can help someone who has $10 in the bank, not
for sure,
$1,000 in the bank.
That's the original thinking, right? And and then people oh, but if you're in fees, this and that. I'm yeah, it is what it is. This is the current state. But let's first of all recognize and admit the current problems, issues, whatever. But let's then face them and let's deal with them, right? And this is for me what Ethereum is doing, right? And again, just like you, I love Bitcoin, awesome technology, but the way they approach things, for me, they kind of try to. Over time, we will always inevitably face some issues, right? In Bitcoin's case, is will there that fixed approach to issuance, will that really work? Their environmental concerns in terms of energy, and their also their obsolescence of hardware. How do you deal with that? And if you only answer to challenges that life will always present to you, is just like, no, these are not challenges, I'm strong, or whatever.
Yeah,
That's not a viable answer, right? And in Ethereum's case, it's like one of their criticisms, for example, of Ethereum is like, oh, but you've been promising this and that for so long, and Ethereum too. Yeah, and I look back at, I think it was Prague DevCon, right? And Vitalik was doing a presentation when he was doing a review of all the different approaches and experiments and research. And again, like, what I really appreciate about this is how candid he was. Oh, we tried this and we did this, and it was a total waste of time and it didn't work. And we tried this, it was a dead end, right? Because when you build something so new, so groundbreaking, right, and so complicated with all of this game theory and math and cryptography and whatnot, it's like you cannot expect to be some kind of linear process, right? And even when you build just any kind of complicated software system, when you kind of know what you want to build, even that will you will easily err like with a factor of like 2, 3, if not 5, right? But when you're doing something so groundbreaking, their R&D that it took some years instead of like half a year and 1 year, yeah, for me that's very reasonable. And again, so let's be candid, let's be open about the challenges, let's look at them, let's face them, and let's deal with them. And that's what I've seen the Ethereum community doing. They've done it time and again, and they constantly doing this, right? New things come up, like for example, over the last year, the problem of minor extracted value or maximum extracted value has become an obvious issue that we have to deal with, and the community, there is an answer to that, flashbots and all kinds of things, and thinking and research. And this is what really gives me hope. And there's no perfect technology, but technology coupled with a passionate core of developers, of supporters, of community moving this forward and evolving and responding to challenges and the current priorities of what life throws at them, that's for me is much more viable. This is like a living organism dealing with things. Like, you can be like a rock and you can try to be strong, but eventually the strongest rock will be blasted off or will disappear, right? But the living organism will birth something new, and that will birth something new, and will continue living on.
Yeah, one of the other I think lasting values in the Ethereum community right now is we don't talk around our challenges. We don't try to circumvent them. We if anything, we talk them to death by going head on at it to solve it. And that's why I would say a year ago, Dima, you probably remember gas prices were really starting to soar.
Yes.
And that was at first I have to say it was like, well, this is in a good way showing the demand for the network we've all been working towards for years.
Right.
But it instantly turned to a sickening feeling of oh my gosh, we've now priced out all these folks that could participate, and how are we going to get to layer 2s? How are we going to get to Ethereum 2.0 sooner? So speaking to the present, what do you think is the greatest challenge in Ethereum right now?
Well, challenge. I think that the challenge and what is happening, I think they are two sides of the same coin, right? So for me, obviously, one big challenge is scalability, and I'm really excited to see how all of these different approaches that we're looking at that are being now tried and tested and rolled out, from Matic to Arbitrum to Optimism to all of those different scaling solutions being now experimented with. So this is obviously a huge area. The whole EIP 1559 thing, and launch of that in July and August, and the drastical change in their monetary policy, if you will, of Ethereum, that's another huge change. And again, it's such a big change that people like to come up like, oh, it will be so awesome, like, pink unicorns and candy everywhere. And the answer is always like, maybe, let's see when it happens. Let's see. Like, I do have high hopes for how it affects ecosystem, but I can also guarantee you there will be all kinds of unintended consequences and challenges, whatnot. I'm also very excited about this roadmap, right? Like, when they stopped talking about Ethereum 2, but instead realized, yeah, it's like, the system is constantly evolving. There are so many different bits and pieces to that. So let's not talk about just like one big thing, because that's not how it's going to happen. So their proof of stake merge is a huge deal, right? And I'm really, really excited about that, because I think that this dialogue about proof of work versus proof of stake, like I bought it into the concept of proof of stake early on, as like conceptually it makes a lot of sense from so many angles, but then also I could see from all the research that I was kind of skimming that, oh yeah, there are lots of issues, like to make sure that it's as secure, as reliable, blah, 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 as proof of work that's been tried and true for so many years. Oh yeah, that's a huge challenge, right? And but I have a lot of confidence based on what is happening, that it's going to happen now pretty soon, and this is a huge shift, right? And making Ethereum so much more environmentally friendly, and enabling, the next steps in the roadmap. Yeah, so those are the things I'm excited about. And obviously, their MEV is a big topic, right? But again, like, I'm so happy to see the dialogue about this, and all those awesomely smart people, and Phil Diane, and so many other awesome people getting involved in this and working on the project to address that. So again, this is the ethos of Ethereum, is like, yeah, we're evolving, we're prepared to face our challenges and move forward.
Yeah, no, well said. And it's funny because a lot of these things that have been promised, I guess, for a longer time, to me, it feels like it was yesterday. And I think by now, being in the community 4 years, I'm on like, sound footing to be able to say, hey, I don't think it's been that long. Like this is going to be, one of the most important updates for us as a community moving to proof of stake. And yeah, it takes time and effort. I'll say this, I'd rather take the time to do it right and mitigate the risks of it going wrong than to rush into something. And that's been, I think for many of us too, we feel like we sort of inherit the benefits of all of this because there are some remarkable research teams that have worked on all of this. And again, I think for the average user though, those benefits are coming sooner, which is going to be the most exciting thing, because one day there will be people using Ethereum, they'll be transacting in DeFi, and they'll have no idea what it's like to transact on layer 1. They'll have no idea, what gas costs like we used to pay to transact. And yeah, it's just, you gotta have patience.
Totally right. And because I have seen the birth of internet, right? And also growing up in the Soviet Union, right? And kind of like, when I started learning computers, I actually started programming with punch cards. So I've seen the evolution of that, right? Like, oh yeah, each punch card is a line of code with basically one operator and some data, and so a piece of program is a bunch of those cards. Like, I've seen all of that. I've seen hard drives that were like this is like 5 megabytes hard drive, right? So the progress is inevitable. So for me, it's the same. Well, it's very similar, right? Like, okay, and I've seen then internet. I've seen BBSs, then I've seen the internet, dial-up modems, and now we have this and that. And in the moment, you cannot imagine what it's going to be in just a few years. So when I looked at Ethereum, it's like, oh yeah, well, of course we have all of those challenges and things, but I know how quickly technology moves forward, right? And I can see how much it resonates, if you will, with their world, with all the different challenges we're now facing, and from monitor systems to governance in its broad sense. And I'm like, oh yeah, so the systems definitely aligned with what the world needs, and there are so many awesome people working toward building and improving and evolving this system. So yeah, this makes a lot of sense. And of course, it's going to be painful in the moment, and that's fine. This is the price you pay for being on their leading edge of the technology. As you know, the expression, sometimes it's the bleeding edge, right? So.
Absolutely. Well, I want to wrap up with just two more questions, and this part of the segment, this is about us getting dad advice from you, Dima. So, as the grandfather of Ethereum, father of Vitalik, I was thinking before the interview about like how remarkable it would be to like watch. I've got two very young kids, both of them are under 5, and I was thinking like how insane it would be to watch them grow up and achieve even a fraction of, I think, what Vitalik has achieved with Ethereum. So I'm curious, in hindsight, like what lessons do you take from raising Vitalik? Like any like parenting tips you can offer me or anyone else who's raising the next founder of a future DeFi project?
Yeah, I mean, my first, the high level advice would be don't force your vision on your kids, right? Because in a way we all do that inevitably, right? Because we become a major imprint on them. But my biggest learning, if you will, and I have 3 kids, Vitalik and 2 daughters, is that it's really more about sensitivity to like, what do they like, what do they not like? When as my daughters get older, and then I try to get them interested in, say, programming and things like that, and then like, oh, my older daughter is not that interested, but you know what, then I can see that she's really awesome with graphics and other kind of expression of art. Then my youngest daughter, then she's not interested in that yet, but she looks like she has a lot of interest. So the question is, how can you be sensitive to what your child is really interested about, and then how can you support them in that, right? Because that's in general, if you will, the problem with education, because I believe that for a human being it's very natural to want to learn, but the way we typically teach human beings, we make it really boring. We kind of try to force the same approach, the same kind of stuff into each child, and it just doesn't work. People have different proclivities and inclinations, desires, whatever, and so how can we be sensitive to that? That's kind of, and then support them in that, right? And one other aspect of that is, for me, not forcing our opinions and ideas on them, because there's a lot of violence, if you will, and aggression in this world. And how can we move this forward is like by recognizing when we interacting with our children, because we care for them and we love them, but in this dynamic, then we also, our ego then kind of wants to be the one that makes decisions, and that one is right. So when Vitalik was growing up, I think that's at least my recollection. I'm curious to kind of hear what he has to say. But as you know, you always have arguments with your children. Oh, let's do this. No, this doesn't make sense. Let's not do this, blah, blah, blah. And for me, it was always about dialogue, right? And can I convince, like, does it make sense? Can we have an open dialogue? Because for me, every human is, obviously, we have to keep our children safe, protect them and whatnot. But then how can we let them flourish instead of like imposing our will and trying to tell them, I know what's right, this is how it should be done. Well, maybe you do, maybe you don't. You're the product of your own upbringing, right? But the environment is different. Things are different. Like even looking at people now, oh, kids spend so much time spending time on devices, blah, blah, blah. Yeah, they do. But this is how we as a society, this is how we adapt to the evolution of technology, right? So this is the reality. So instead of trying to say, oh, this is bad, let's kind of force and restrict them, it's okay. This is a challenge, and this is also our new reality. How can we kind of look at that, but not be, if you will, so righteous that like we know what's right, let's kind of try to enforce that, right? So that's another aspect of parenting that I see as very important. Like, can we start with compassion and understanding and sensitivity?
That was an incredibly insightful answer. Wow, I gotta say, maybe I could just set up a session once a week. I'll just please tell me what else I can do here with the kids. Yeah, really on point. It's interesting too, because like my son is 5 and he just had his birthday, and you know, there is no doubt, like I've already been like trying to like get him interested in sports that I played growing up.
Right.
I even like, you know, crypto obviously is super far off, but I've like even like tried to introduce like little piggy banks with like labels on it to think about like just budgeting, like things that I'm thinking like I wish someone from a young age had been telling me about, like just the concept of putting money aside. And then I gotta say, like, I mean, it's hilarious because all he wants to do is look at, you know, Scooby-Doo and Spider-Man. But, you know, as a result, I think based on what you said, you know, I feel much better about my approach to parenting here. One final question, you know, you are a very active member of the Ethereum community. Like obviously you even attend events. I think you were at like ETH Denver, not
I was, yeah, a year and a half ago, whatever it was.
Yeah, whenever the last
time
I had it. I'm thinking, how do you think about your role in the Ethereum community? And maybe it's more about like, what do you think is like your, you know, legacy that you want to leave? Like what are you working towards to continue to help Ethereum like realize its vision?
Yeah, it's at this stage of my life, I'll give you kind of with their broader context, is like I've built a number of businesses over my lifetime, and I'm still involved in a couple of business ventures. But at this point, I'm no longer kind of that excited about doing hands-on stuff. But actually, for a while now, I've been much more excited in things like mentoring and coaching all this awesome humans building stuff. So for me, it's really whatever we would build, however complicated and technical the project is, end of the day, it's also a reflection of your human values. And so for me, it's really about supporting all the humans around me. And there are many people I'm connected to in the Ethereum community or beyond that. It can be just a random person who, after reading some of the stuff I write on Twitter, and like, hey, what book would you recommend I read about this, right? Or somebody is in depression or whatever it is. So for me, it's really about supporting humans and then helping them to be the best. And the best will be different from each human. For somebody, it will be they will go on and build this awesome protocol or whatever new project. Somebody will create some art, and somebody will do something else, right? So for me, it's really just being myself, that, you know, my best self that can support other people around me. And this is just like a wave that propagates around each one of us.
Yeah, and we need more of this. It's so challenging to be a founder of any business or work at a startup, let alone a startup in our space. Things just move so quickly. You know, I've been so fortunate to work with the Zapper team here the last year, and I mean, I can tell anyone, however crazy you think it looks on the outside, it's insane on the inside.
Right.
It's also, it's like a beautiful chaos because you're working in a space where like your users are constantly reaching out to you with feedback. Your users, in many cases, just by using your product, demonstrate that they have some very aligned values with you. And it's very special. You know, I grew up in a small business, like a retail business selling stuff over the counter. I've worked in food businesses, like I've, you know, worked in your typical tech startups. It's very rare that you get to work in an industry where nearly everyone you meet has so much in common. Like it just, this space draws people with, again, I think certain values. And unfortunately, we tend to focus at times on what like separates us and where we disagree. And, you know, you know, whether it's like a war between like a Bitcoin maxi and an Ethereum, it is good to sort of step back, zoom out, and appreciate like, hey, like there's so much more good we can focus on continuing to build. And for me, there's just so much going on in Ethereum and in DeFi. Like, I just feel so lucky that like every day there's something new. This week we had the Volmex volatility index launch. So we have a volatility index now built on Ethereum. And that was just one of many things that happened. We had the AL vaults with Alchemix. Honestly, there's just so many things. I'll look back at times and realize I wrote a note to myself to check an app out, and it's like from 5 days ago, but it feels like it was a century ago. So, but Dima, thanks so much for your time. Like, this is a total pleasure and honor to get to interview you. And, I want to remind everyone they should follow you here on Twitter. They should also check out Blockgeeks. Do you want to just remind everyone what's the mission behind Blockgeeks and, who might benefit from it?
Blockgeeks is, I co-founded this company about 5 years ago, really, and this is one of the efforts to support this space in terms of helping new entrants to the space learn and join this movement, if you will. And originally our focus was on educating developers, and now the focus is expanding because there are so many other players, if you will, participants in this space, from investors to just people in all these different enterprises and government officials, and everybody has their role to play. So at Blockgeeks, we just trying to create educational materials and offer different ways for them to onboard them and help them support this movement of decentralization.
Absolutely. And that's blockgeeks.com if anyone's interested to check it out. Well, hey, I'm going to hit the animation video will take us back into a green room. But thanks everyone for tuning in. Reminder, you can continue to learn more about DeFi and Ethereum at learn.zapper.fi. Don't forget to subscribe at tv.zapper.fi so you can watch this episode and all the rest of them, including our past Yield TV shows at tv.zapper.fi. And other than that, we'll be back next week. So Dima, and again,
awesome. Thank you.
Thanks so much. And here we go. All right, everyone, have a great weekend. We'll see you later. Bye.
See you.